Moving on to the other Dutch landscape artist, the other most well-known artist was Albert Sijp. He was a gentleman farmer, and he seemed to have exerted a considerable influence out of Holland and particularly in England and in France. His painting of the riders by the river shows mountains, a hazy low mountain also in the background. There is a little bit of the river which is seen towards the left, and most importantly, it is the quality of light which one sees here. And there are two riders in the foreground with the horse drinking the water, and on the right hand side are the representation of the cows as they sit in the meadows. Maybe it is the early morning that has been represented by uh, Albert Sijp here. Another very important Dutch artist was Van Gogh. Van Gogh is considered to be also a pioneer along with Vermeer with his view of Delft, with Rembrandt as well as Frans Hals. And he has created the panoramic scenes, and this particular one, which is known as the view of Haarlem, which he has painted, shows the composition completely dominated by the sky with its billowing clouds and the drama of light and dark that is being played out. And the horizontal strip of land, which is just about one third, has also the representation of the windmill, a woman who is working on the farmland, as well as the sea or perhaps a river that has its various activities with the boat sailing, and in the far background can also be seen a bit of architecture. Uh, Another painting which he has done is known as the river scene, and it's a close-up view which is done very differently with foliage, the waters, the ducks playing in the water, and then also a church tower that can be seen in the background. Uh, the most important artist coming after Van Gogh was Miendet Hobbema, who for a time was also a pupil of Jacob Ruysdael. Hobbema was more interested in painting the details. He had an eye for details to nature, unlike Ruysdael, who tried to bring in emotions into his paintings, those of sentiments, those of the romantic mindset, etc. But beyond that, was not interested in showing the emotions as he was interested in showing the physical character of nature as his eyes saw it. So much so it is said that he excelled particularly in painting trees with a variety of forms and their tones, color tones, etc. He also painted the same subject again and again, particularly what is known as a watermill. In the latter part of his life, when he found a job in Amsterdam, for almost 2 decades he gave up painting. And the paintings which he had done earlier were mainly those of the watermills or the farmlands, where there was always a farmstead which was very much there. And in this particular painting of the watermill, one can see the women washing their clothes and a little kind of an activity which is happening in the middle ground, whereas the dominance is given to the watermill with its red tiled roof and of course the trees, which has been delineated with great detail with particularly the play of light and shade. This play of light and shade continues in almost all the works of all the Dutch landscape artists. This was because this was also the age of Baroque. The age of Baroque, where extreme contrast of light and dark was developed into what was known as tenebrism, to make it very dramatic, to make it also very spiritual, and to create a kind of a theatrical setting so that it conveys a mood. And that is why in nearly all of the works there is always a play of light. If there's not an intense contrast, but there's definitely a contrast of light as it was played out in nature. Now, Miendat's very important painting is what is known as the Avenue at Middelharnis. Here he does not paint his familiar watermills, nor does he paint a farmstead, but rather he gives us an avenue of lean, spindly, tall poplar trees that can be seen. And it is said that this is a painting which was done almost 2 decades later, after he had given up painting because he was doing a job in Amsterdam, and he came out with this masterpiece, which to this day is associated with the landscapes of Hobbema. And when we think of Hobbema, we always think of this avenue at Middle Harness with its spindly poplar trees. And he gives a background of the city or a town, and perhaps it is the same town of Middle Harness. Another important painter is Paulus Potter. Holland, as we all know, is associated with dairy products and particularly the cheese. So naturally here is a painter, an artist who gives us the portrait of the cows, which are so intimately, closely related to the very economy of Holland. And he has painted 4 cows in this particular work. Then I need to also mention that as part of the Flemish artists, which was also a geographical makeup of Holland earlier, is the very famous artist Peter Paul Rubens. Peter Paul Rubens is well known for his religious paintings that he has executed, the drama of the moments of various religious subjects that he portrayed, like the descent of the cross, from the cross, ascent from the cross, ascent of the cross rather. All of these paintings today are well associated with Rubens, but Rubens was equally interested in the landscape around him, and during his lifetime he painted at least 3 dozen landscapes. There is one particular here which shows early in the morning the hunters with their hounds chasing a stag, and there is a sun which is coming out from behind the foliage, creating a very beautiful scintillating effect. And all the trees are rendered in extreme contrast of light and dark. They are quite dark in hue and in its tones and in its tints and subtleties. Now, this was supposed to be the favorite pastime of the aristocrats, and this is what Rubens painted at his home, which was near Steen. And he lived here also at the latter part of his life because he was also struck by arthritis and he could not do much work. And this is how he created landscape for his own pleasure. Now, one important aspect which needs to be mentioned is that all the Dutch landscapes painted by all the Dutch artists were realistic, yes, but they were not the real scenes as one would imagine it to be. They always sketched outdoors. They never painted outdoors. They sketched outdoors, and then they composed the pictures in the studio from a variety and number of sketches as well as from memory. And they took those elements of nature or those parts of nature and the landscape which they felt would bring in or make a good composition, and they put it together accordingly. That is why when you look at Albert Sijp's painting, it's unusual to find mountains in Holland, but he has shown the mountains here because maybe he wanted to create some kind of a drama with the rocky terrain. So in this respect, one should always remember that these were composed landscapes. Today, if we have to go and stand where Ruysdael has painted, it will be difficult to find a site there, except perhaps of the mill at Drutstedt, where the mill today is replaced by a new one, but otherwise 300 years later, we find the spot to be almost the same. But this is not the case with the other artists. So in this way, they composed a scene of nature and they selected what was important for them as part of the composition and contributed to a new innovative representation of the subject matter of what is known as panoramic. So the Dutch landscape artists made a tremendous contribution in the development of this genre in art, and it was to influence later artists considerably, particularly in the 18th and the 19th century.